What does a $40 million fleet of seized MotoGP bikes reveal about the government's power to confiscate your property before a single conviction?
That is a staggering number. And, a seizure that dramatic, it immediately pulls back the curtain on one of the most powerful tools the federal government has.
A tool most people don't even know exists, the asset forfeiture program.
Mm-hmm.
So the news hook that brings us here, it's really something. U.S. authorities and the FBI just seized dozens of these incredible racing motorcycles.
The whole collection valued at what, US $40 million?
$40 million. They're believed to belong to a man named Ryan James Wedding, who, as of March 2025, is actually on the FBI's 10 most wanted list.
So this is not just some small-time case.
No, not at all. And it puts a huge spotlight on the federal machine behind it. Specifically, the Department of Justice's asset forfeiture program, which is mostly managed by the U.S. Marshals Service.
Right, and their whole mission, when you get down to it, isn't just about arresting people. It's about taking the money out of the equation.
You have to destabilize the entire operation.
Exactly. You hit them in the wallet. And asset forfeiture is the primary way they do that.
And the sheer scale of this, I mean, it's really jaw-dropping. We are not talking about a small program. As of September 2024, the U.S. Marshals Service reported holding, get this, $7.6 billion in assets.
$7.6 billion. That's larger than a lot of banks. And it's everything, from real estate and cars to crypto and cash.
So our mission for this deep dive is to get into the rules that govern this whole machine. We're going right into the DOJ's 2025 Asset Forfeiture Policy Manual to understand the rules of engagement for you, the citizen.
We need to know who decides what gets taken, who's watching over the process, and, maybe the most important question, where do all those billions of dollars actually go?
Okay, let's unpack this.
Where do we start?
Let's start with the basics, the philosophy. What are the stated goals that justify this kind of power?
Well, the foundation is all laid out in the Attorney General's guidelines. There are 4 main goals. The first one is the one I think everyone gets intuitively.
To punish criminals.
To punish and deter, yes. You strip them of the property they used for the crime or bought with the profits, and you take away the whole reason for doing it in the first place.
Right. If there's no profit, the business model just collapses.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. The second goal, though, that one's a little more complex.
It is. The second goal is to promote and enhance cooperation. Think about it. Modern crime, it doesn't care about city lines or state borders.
Or even national borders.
Not at all. So asset forfeiture lets federal, state, local, even foreign law enforcement work together. It creates a unified front, so a huge case, like the $40 million bike collection, can be handled under federal law.
Even if, say, a local cop made the initial discovery.
Precisely. And then there's the third goal, which is really about justice.
For the victims.
For the victims. It's to recover assets, to compensate them. This makes sure that the money stolen or earned illegally goes back to the people who were actually harmed.
Which is a powerful idea.
Mm-hmm.
And the fourth one?
The fourth is sort of a check on the whole system. It mandates that the program be administered professionally and lawfully. And when you look at the numbers, you see why that's so important.
What are we talking about?
In fiscal year 2024 alone, authorities took in over 13,000 new assets, and they disposed of almost as many. That volume requires incredibly tight administrative control.
Which I imagine is where this idea of prudent seizure planning comes in. It's right there in Chapter 1 of the manual. It sounds kind of bureaucratic.
It sounds dry, but it's actually a critical financial firewall for the government. The DOJ demands this planning to stop agencies from starting a forfeiture case that's going to end up costing more than the asset is worth.
So they don't want to lose money on the deal.
Exactly. The program is supposed to be self-sustaining. So if you've got, say, a contaminated industrial site or some really hard-to-manage asset.
The manual mentions exotic animals.
Right, or even exotic animals. If the cost to manage and sell that property is more than its value, they're supposed to just walk away. They have to make sure it's financially viable.
Which brings us right to the core concept here. Net equity. That seems to be the real deciding factor.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that's where the rubber meets the road. The government isn't interested in seizing someone's debt. Net equity is what's left after you subtract all the liabilities, mortgages, liens, and, critically, the government's own estimated cost to manage and sell the thing.
And if that number is too low, they generally leave it alone.
They do, unless there's some other compelling law enforcement reason to take it.
And the manual is incredibly specific about this. It sets actual dollar amounts, these minimum thresholds. For anyone worried about property rights, these are the guardrails. What are they for big-ticket items?
For something like real property, a house or land, The policy demands it has a minimum net equity of at least $30,000 or 20% of its value, whichever is more.
30,000. And for a car?
For vehicles, it's $10,000 in net equity. For an airplane, it jumps back up to $30,000.
So why $30,000 for a house? Is that just an estimate for what it costs to seize, manage, and sell a piece of real estate?
It reflects the massive overhead. You've got legal fees, insurance, maintenance, property managers, maybe environmental cleanup, a whole long process. That $30,000 minimum is a pragmatic financial calculation to make sure the fund doesn't go broke handling small value properties.
Okay, let's pivot to cash. That's often the most controversial part of this whole discussion. We've all heard the stories. What does the 2025 manual say the baseline is?
The standard minimum for a judicial forfeiture case is $5,000 in cash.
Okay.
But, and this is a really important but, that threshold drops way down to just $1,000 if the person is also being criminally prosecuted for related crimes.
So there has to be a connected criminal case.
Yes. And I noticed you pointed out the term structuring in that section.
I did. For anyone who doesn't know, what is that?
Structuring is basically when you break up a big cash transaction into smaller chunks. You do it to stay under the $10,000 reporting rule that banks have. It's a classic money laundering trick.
So the lower threshold is there because even a small amount of structured cash can be evidence of a much bigger crime.
Exactly. It's a red flag. And it's also important to remember that this whole profit motive, it goes out the window when an item is just inherently a tool of a crime.
Right. There are exceptions.
Huge exceptions.
Yeah.
The manual says these minimums do not apply to things like firearms, explosives, anything used in child exploitation, or even cars that have those aftermarket hidden compartments.
Because the value isn't the point.
The value is irrelevant. They are seized because they're direct instruments of a crime.
I do appreciate that there are administrative checks, though. Any seizure that doesn't meet these minimums has to be approved in writing by a supervisor.
That documentation is a necessary brake on the system. And that brake is even more important when we talk about local police getting involved. That's the adoption mechanism.
Okay, explain adoption for us.
So adoption is when a local or state agency seizes property under their own state laws. But then a federal agency can step in and adopt that seizure, running it through the federal forfeiture process.
As long as the crime also violated a federal law.
Correct. It allows local departments to use federal resources on really big, complex cases that might otherwise be too much for them to handle, like, say, a $40 million motorcycle collection.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. The actual nuts and bolts of managing these things once they're seized. I mean, seizing cash seems easy, but a house or crypto.
Let's start with real property, a house. In civil cases, the government is generally barred from physically seizing it, like kicking people out before there's a court judgment.
That sounds like an important due process protection.
It's a critical one, and it's in the federal statute. The only exception is if they can prove there are exigent circumstances, meaning the property is being used for a crime right now.
So what do they do instead? They can't just take the title.
No, the first step is much less invasive. They file a civil complaint and post something called a lis pendens.
Which means?
Suit pending. It's a public notice filed with the county that says, hey, this property is part of a lawsuit. It warns off any potential buyers. The physical takeover usually only happens much later.
Okay, that's complicated enough. But now we have digital assets. How does a 2025 manual handle something as volatile as cryptocurrency?
It's very technical. First, they usually need a seizure warrant. Then, the crypto has to be moved immediately into a government-controlled wallet, like a cold storage wallet.
And why is that so important?
Because in a civil case, the court's power, its jurisdiction, is legally based on the government having physical control of the asset. For crypto, the asset is the private key.
And the manual has a really important rule about converting that crypto into cash, into fiat, right?
Well, absolutely. The policy is very clear. You do not liquidate the crypto until the forfeiture case is final.
Why not?
It's all about managing financial risk for the government. Imagine they seize Bitcoin, sell it immediately for $50,000, and then the owner wins the case.
And the price of Bitcoin is shot up to $100,000.
Exactly. The owner could then sue the government for that $50,000 gain they missed out on. The policy is to just hold the asset and avoid that liability.
And I'm guessing local agencies can't just freelance this stuff.
No way. The legal and financial risks are too high. They have to consult with the DOJ's Money Laundering and Asset Recovery Section, MLRs, before they can even ask a court to sell crypto before a case is over.
Okay, one last administrative check that I think really speaks to the program's integrity is this strict rule against using the seized property.
Yes, this is essential for public trust. Government agents, contractors, no one is allowed to use seized property. You can't drive the seized Ferrari or live in the seized
I
mansion.
would think not.
For two reasons. One, the government doesn't legally own it yet, so there's a huge liability issue. And two, it just looks terrible. It would completely undermine the legitimacy of the whole program.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Mm.
once the assets are finally forfeited, we get to the whole point of this massive process,
Yeah.
compensation and funding. This is where the money goes.
Correct. And the first priority is always, always victims and innocent owners.
Mm.
There are two main ways the DOJ does this: remission and restoration.
Let's take remission first.
Remission is a process where victims can petition the Attorney General to get their losses back from the forfeited money, and there's a pecking order.
No.
Innocent owners get first priority, then linholters, like a bank with a mortgage, and then finally, other victims of the crime.
And restoration is different.
Yeah, restoration is a bit of a hybrid. It's a way for the Attorney General to transfer forfeited funds directly to a court to pay off a criminal's restitution order. The numbers from 2024 really show the impact.
How much are we talking?
In that year alone, $605 million was distributed to victims and claimants.
Wow. $600 million in criminal profits going directly back to victims.
It's a huge amount. But beyond the victims, there's the equitable sharing program.
And this is where funds go back to the police departments that helped out.
Exactly. It's a critical part of that cooperation goal we talked about. Federal law lets the Attorney General share the money with state, local, or tribal agencies who participated in the case.
And again, the numbers are huge. It shows the incentives at play for local departments. In 2024, they shared $383 million.
It's a massive injection of funds into law enforcement budgets, all coming directly from criminal activity.
But there's a key detail there. They only get the money, right?
A crucial detail: they are explicitly prohibited from getting the actual property. They only get the cash proceeds. The federal government handles liquidating the assets, whether it's the motorcycles or a house, and then they distribute the funds.
So when we step back, we see this immense program, billions of dollars in assets, all designed to hit criminal organizations and fund law enforcement. And it's all built on this careful legal tightrope walk.
Right, with rules about prudent planning, net equity, and absolutely no personal use of the property.
But the manual also shows a system trying to correct itself, to protect due process.
It does. We talked about those structuring cases. Well, the 2025 manual says prosecutors have to return that money within 7 days if they decide there isn't enough evidence to go forward.
7 days. That's fast.
It has to be. It's a recognition that while the system needs to seize things quickly based on probable cause, it has to release them even faster when that cause falls apart.
Which leaves us with a final question for you to think about. When you consider that local law enforcement agencies received nearly $400 million in shared funds last year, a massive incentive, are these mandatory minimum thresholds high enough to protect property rights? Or do they create an incentive for police to prioritize seizures based on profit instead of the severity of the crime? That's the question we're left with.